Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the August 17th, 2011 Blog Talk Radio Show podcast. As you might have noticed, we were attempting to move to TalkShoe, but due to some technical problems there, we decided to move back for the time being, even though Blog Talk, of course, has these horrible advertisements that torture all of us. But we'll go with what we can at the moment, given the environment we live in. Unfortunately, advertising is a staple of modern society. I've almost considered making a documentary called A World Without Advertising. It was something I thought about a long time ago, just to profile what advertising is. And I don't mean just in the sense of product communication, but how it works with marketing for political elections, how it works for people's psychology and their associations to their relationships, and how culture is basically bred out of this sort of consumer association that's been manifest ever since around World War II, when the necessity for more consumption really became apparent. But I digress already. So I have a lot of stuff I want to cover today, including the Zeitgeist Media Festival, the town halls, the Zeitgeist Movement. As a summary, I want to talk about activism and what the movement represents for those that might be new, and how you can be involved. I want to also address quickly the nature of the market system. I'm working on another town hall lecture for the end of this month, and I'm going to do a very different talk than what I've been doing recently. As all of us know, we've had this big debt collapse around the world, and we've got a lot of social instability occurring in London and many other regions, Israel, and a lot of repetition in other countries that we had seen these revolutions and we'd seen these uprisings, and they keep coming back because obviously they're not being satisfied. I'll say off the cuff, until these people that are getting upset know what the change is supposed to be, they're not going to progress very well. And this is where the movement comes into play as far as our awareness actions, even more so. If people don't know where to go, it doesn't matter how upset they get, And I really encourage anyone in these regions, if they're listening, that have these instability patterns occurring, to don't violently revolt. Do not do anything violent, because you're only hurting yourself. The more violence that occurs in society, the more pressure will be placed by police and the authorities. The more regions will be given less courtesy, if you will, with respect to how they're treated. We've seen this in the 1960s throughout the United States, civil rights issues, and across the world too, a very destabilized period then as well. But just remember that you have to promote the direction. That's the goal. That's the solution. In other words, if you can complain and you can get upset all day long about whatever might be happening as far as unemployment, as far as debt, as far as the corruption that pairs in with that through administrations and this sort of stranglehold global debt collapse that we're experiencing right now. But until you promote a solution, you're not really doing anything. And keep that in mind when you speak with people that are upset about what's happening in the world. I'm no longer complaining. I mean, I do my share for the sake of communication, but I encourage all of you to be able to explain how the solution is what it is. And once you do that, it funnels everything in. It funnels it in where everything that people typically complain about becomes null and void and moot, because the solution, as we describe, railroads through it. It plows through it, knocks it all to the side. It makes it irrelevant once people have the focus of what true sustainability actually is. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we go along. And by the end of the show, I'm going to try and answer some questions as well. So, all right here. Well, first of all, I'm surrounded by boxes right now. One of the reasons that the show's been a little bit erratic is because I had to do an apartment move. They jacked up the rent in my apartment, so I had to move. And that's been as anyone knows, with a house move, it's very chaotic and difficult to reassemble, especially for me. I'm so disappointed with how much stuff I'm forced to move around. I so wish we had at least elements of a resource-based economy, that I wouldn't have to maintain all of this stuff myself, and I could just return them to places to be housed. Would be such an incredible ease of lifestyle if we actually had that capacity. A lot of people don't think about that, but that's an important point. If you think about how locked down we all are due to how much property we have, and we have to have on average. I won't go on that tangent, but I think you get the idea. So the Zeitgeist Media Festival. The Zeitgeist Media Festival is doing very, very well for the Los Angeles event, and we have some tremendously good events that have popped up across the world, from Alaska to Canada to Slovakia to Indianapolis to Australia to Ecuador, all of which can be found at zeitgeistmediafestival.org. Now, some of these events, I've been looking through them. I mean, some of them are massive. I mean, some of you guys out there are doing tremendous work to bring artists in to facilitate this, and I have to tell you, I'm extremely impressed and excited by what we can accomplish with this. I've also been very happy to see the number of food drive associations that have been made. We've listed some of them on the site, again at zeitgeistmediafestival.org. And we are in direct support of these food drives because they're based on resources, they're not based on money, so there's not much people can take off the top. That's the problem with corruption in the monetary system. We only facilitate charity if someone can make a profit off of charity in the end. That's an unfortunate reality. But yeah, so please check this site out if you haven't, if you're new. And if you haven't a location or something small or even large, please create an event for your area. It doesn't have to be huge. It can be small. Just to get this kind of presence out there. For those that don't know, the Zeitgeist Media Festival is an attempt to use art to change the demeanor of people, the feeling that people have with their view of reality, their worldview, because a lot of the values that are in our culture, as we talk about, really don't support sustainability. And the goal of the movement and the goal of the Media Festival, in part, is to promote sustainable values. So instead of having like a bling culture and people seeking money and being rewarded through the value of money and all the things that go along with this, well, this distortion that we have, where people are seeking money in and of itself as opposed to actually adapting for social change, actually pursuing social change and progress, we're going to continue to see failures and divisions. This socially Darwinistic reality that we have just can't fly for too much longer, and the world you see around you is the result. But as far as the LA main event, we have Billy Gibbons, who's from the world famous ZZ Top. They were monstrous back in the 90s, and he does some very, very fun stuff now. Extremely socially aware individual, a brilliant, brilliant guy. We're really happy to have him in the Los Angeles event. We also have Charles Fleischer, who you might know him from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. He's been around for years and years. His history is quite impressive. Truly a unique individual and thinker too. He talks about a lot of very interesting subjects. He's obsessed with math and has a lot of fun kind of ideas that he puts out there, and he meshes it in with comedy. It's very appreciative and very much in line with what we're talking about. But beyond that, if we have of course, Natasha Atlas, who's always been a big supporter. We have Lily Hayden, who helped me with the track for All Good People, the Yes tune that was in Zeitgeist Moving Forward. We have the Lost Children of Babylon. These guys put out an album more or less dedicated to these types of ideas. Really fun stuff, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to be doing a customized work, basically another Zeitgeist live performance piece that will be a one-off 40-minute work, which will basically be a mini film, but it will be more gestural. So anyway, please go to this site and check it out and submit your event if you haven't. I'm expecting a couple £1,000 of food to be generated by Los Angeles alone, and we definitely want to document all the food that's brought into this for the food drives, so we have a record, and we're going to start maintaining a global record of how much food we've raised and distributed for the poor. Here in Los Angeles, it's out of control with the poverty and the homelessness. So please check that out. Okay, the Zeitgeist Movement blog, the Zeitgeist Movement newsletter blog. We're finalizing the domain on this and getting the technicals finished, but basically we have this blog that's been mentioned a few times that will be for the public to submit not only general blog materials, but also newsletter articles and press release articles that we tend to mail out to the global list. This is really effective and important. I hope everyone understands this. So if anyone out there has skills to write, please think about participating with this. I've written a lot. There's been a lot of other people that have written some, and every day there seems to be something new that the Zeitgeist Movement can relate to with respect to, say, the debt ceiling that we just dealt with, the pending debt collapse, the general mathematical inevitability of what's happening, the social destabilization that's occurring. The true causality of all the things that the media has been talking about, of course, isn't being addressed. We could even do cultural things. I mean, the Zeitgeist Movement isn't just about solely about the resource-based economic model. It's in some kind of finite element where it's physical. It's about what comprises the values and the reasoning and the worldview that could make something like this society work. And that's something important to remember. So please, if you are a good writer, if you do feel confident that you understand this material in the direction, please submit to this blog when we finally have it up, because it's going to be very important. In fact, I'm going to take this time now to jump straight into participation with the Zeitgeist Movement. I think there's a lot of confusion out there as far as what people are expected to do or how they define themselves. The first thing I like to say is there really is no such thing as a Zeitgeist Movement member in and of itself. We use this distinction in many ways just because we need some form of distinction. But a Zeitgeist Movement member, there's nothing to sign up for. There's no dues to pay. To consider yourself a member of the Zeitgeist Movement means you understand the material and you have an interest to communicate it to your fellow man. That's it. You don't necessarily have to be a part of anything if you understand the material. But when it comes to social activism and the interest to create critical mass, it does become important. So let's assume that you're new to the Zeitgeist Movement and you are learning about the information, you're reading the PDFs and you're going through the lectures, and you feel you eventually get a decent understanding of the problems that we have today and the basic foundation of a solution, of a resource-based economic model, what it means to calculate society, what it means to be responsible and scientific with resources, which also extends to our behavior and drawing our values from the management of those resources, from the observation of natural processes. If we believe something that isn't supported by the physical environment, it's to our own detriment. And this is as obvious as it is. It's something that is unfortunately still in the shadows, if you will, due to the heavy political, religious, and economic indoctrinations out there that are based on ideas that really are almost explicitly opposite to what is needed from a scientific view for human survival, especially at this point in time. So let's assume that you've gained this information. And by the way, if anyone is new listening, please go to the main site and go through everything on the left-hand side so you can begin to understand. It really isn't complex. The specifics are complex, but once you get the foundation under your belt, you start to kind of feel it out and you'll start to gravitate towards data and new information that will expand on that information, expand on those basic premises. Excuse me. Now, engagement in the movement, first of all, means that you'd be in a chapter, and you'd either join a chapter in your region or you'd start a chapter. It's very easy to do. You can go to the chapters site to check the chapters that we have, the chapters page on the main site, thezeitgeistmovement.com, to check the chapters that are available. You can email Gilbert and he can tell you about what's happening in any particular region. We do have to update that. There are many, many more chapters than what we have listed on the site. The dominant countries are listed on the gateway page. If you want to find a chapter, you go to the gateway page. If you happen to be in one of those countries, go through the country, click the country, and then find and email the main site, and they will help you. This is the role of coordination. So you're in a chapter now, or you're starting a chapter. Then what do you do? Well, the first thing I think any member should do is they need to have some type of vehicle for themselves to communicate these ideas in their own research, because that's really what we all are. We're all researchers. We're a team of people that are trying to learn and then figure out ways to not only present that information to others, but to also begin to put pressure on the system through this educational process and hope to get other people motivated for change. So everyone out there that's in the movement or considers to be in the movement should have say a YouTube account where they post ideas that they find. This isn't a big deal, is it? Everyone should have a YouTube account. Honestly, I think everyone should have a WordPress blog or any type of blog to simply document what's going on, to keep a positive notion in the search engines. We have always a great number of critics out there, and a lot of people complain about this. They don't like their egos being battered, and they don't like to feel like they're in the line of fire. Well, it's up to you to counter that if you feel that way. It's up to you to do what you can to make sure the truth about what the movement's doing is coming out, because I can tell you right now, as I've denoted before, that the storm hasn't even started against the Zeitgeist movement as we continue to grow, which we are, and I'm thoroughly impressed by our growth rate still, even though the debacle with the Venus Project did occur a number of months back. So Engagement in chapters, engagement in a personal internet setting. If you are working with coordination in your chapter, you should probably put out, if your chapter is big enough and it's worthwhile, put out your own newsletter. What we do on global could easily be mirrored on regional chapters, in regional chapters. So having a newsletter, even having a radio show for your chapter. Let's say if you are in a chapter that's a couple thousand people, I'd say that's prime for doing your own radio show if you're active. These are very common things that I think we've stated before, but I think are very important to consider. So if I was to make a list for anyone listening that's trying to figure out what to do, first of all, you have to be educated. Second of all, you need to join a chapter or start one. Become a coordinator, become a member of the chapter. These chapters not only have to have their own meetings of some accord to figure out how to engage the public, the town halls become critically important. The once a month town halls. These are very effective in the work that we're doing in Los Angeles. We've had a tremendously good response with these, and I really enjoy doing them. And I think all of you out there will find the same. Now, once you have the town halls, make sure you document everything. And this goes back to the need to keep the internet flow going and keep data going out there, keep it fresh. So every time you do a town hall, please tape it and put it on YouTube. Very important. Coupled with this, of course, is Zeitgeist Day and the Zeitgeist Media Festival. Two different ideas. Zeitgeist Day is more important, Zeitgeist Day is more direct. Once a year, Zeitgeist Day is there to bring in anyone and everyone, both in support or not in support, whomever, to express larger order ideas. It's like a town hall, but much larger. You can have guest speakers, you can do a lot more with this particular day. We've had very good luck with Zeitgeist Day. We've had major reviews and big publications because of this, and it's only going to get larger if people continue to do it. That will come up in March of next year. So Town Hall, Zeitgeist Day, Zeitgeist Media Festival. Now there's something that I haven't mentioned yet. Actually, I'm going to wait on that because it's not relevant to this particular point. The engagement of the community, there's plenty of things you can do. So if you believe in this direction, you want to help society with these ideas, if you see the problem and you see the solution, then it's up to you to figure out creative ways to do so. This is what we're all doing. We're not at a stage where we're all trying to be jock frescoes and do heavy level invention. This is far too distant right now. If we can get the values of the system down where people can understand it, then we can get engineers and scientists that can also understand it. And then eventually this will materialize. But it has to start with the value shift level initially. And this is what makes the Zeitgeist Movement so critical and what separates it from the Venus Project in structure. It's very, very important that each one of us think of ideas, like for example, in your meetings, in your chapter meetings, in the administration meetings of coordinators. The majority of the conversation should be about what people are doing to engage the external. That's it. Be very, very careful if you get into internal debates, personality conflicts. I mean, unfortunately, this goes along with the territory of having such a large group of people broken into segments. Sometimes egos get in the way. This is something that has to be dealt with, but everyone has to have patience with each other and remember what the final goal is. If we can't communicate these ideas and get the public to understand these ideas en masse, then we're going to fail, and that's that. So that's where the skill set needs to arise within all of us. I do it with my films. The orientation, PDF, and video will be out soon for others to digest. I shouldn't have to belabor it, and I think everyone understands it. But I do notice again a certain placated behavior in the midst of a world that's starting to come down on itself. And I can only just encourage you as best I can to really do your best to try and go one person at a time, group by group, to try and get people to understand this. Remember, the Zeitgeist Movement is really irrelevant. It's irrelevant by its name, it's irrelevant by its sense of institution. It's there to create critical mass, but that really means we're trying to get the humanity to share a similar value set so we can get away from this parasitic paradigm that's destroying us, this destructive paradigm. It's not about the Zeitgeist Movement. It's not about the Venus Project. It's not about Peter Joseph. It's not about Jacques Fresco. It's not about any individual or any organization. It's about a common value theme of sustainability, learning those values from the scientific causality around us. about what truth actually is, not what tradition has manifested, both political, economic, or even religious. These are, in and of themselves, problematic institutions because they're not actually based on truth and what sustains humanity. This is the core of the philosophy, and it branches out into all sorts of other fields that can help us, from how we apply technology, from what we can do to improve human health across the board, mental health. That's why I had all that information in Zeitgeist moving forward at the beginning about public health. People don't think about society with respect to public health, but that's precisely how we should be thinking about it, not GDP and money and everything else that's become so distorted. So anyway, I'm not going to go on that tangent either. But I will say before I forget that there is the think tank that I've mentioned a few times that I'm still keeping on the back burner as we build up the rest of these issues that I've mentioned prior. That will begin actually engaging reconstruction processes based on what's technical, not what's affordable. This will be a think tank that will eventually have an annual event, maybe even multiple annual events globally, where they show through 3D modeling how individual regions can be made sustainable, and to show how the kind of prosperity can exist through those processes. This isn't anything new. We've talked about this before, but it's very important because this will manifest the data set, the self-evident data set that really is very obvious, but no one is willing to think about things in the terms of what's possible through resources and design scientifically. They only think about things through what they can afford. And if we can get the public to understand that, that would be a tremendous accomplishment, for they would no longer have patience for this sort of monetary issue. Okay, so I apologize in general. I'm really tired. I hope all of this makes sense. Okay, the town halls. I'd like to shift gears here and talk about the market system for a second. This is a context of the market system I've never actually talked about, at least I don't think I have. I'm always obsessed with kind of finding the root of things. What does it mean? What is the intent of something at its core, of any particular structure or approach? For example, we have a competitive market economy. The invisible hand claims that Darwinistic competition and the pursuit of one's self-interest somehow magically manifests the benefit of the society as a whole. Obviously, we know that isn't true, but that is the philosophy. But at the core of that, what is the real argument? At the core, it's stating that, okay, we do have to take care of society. It does make the assumption that there has to be some type of broader social organization, even though it's based in a very erroneous manner on the idea that everyone pretending like there isn't an association will somehow manifest that. And this is where the free market's distortion and anarchy really originates. What does it mean to have a competitive society to produce a collaborative effect? Because that's really what it is. It's a competitive notion that's seeking a collaborative and unifying effect. Obviously that doesn't work, but it's interesting to see the point, because at the very bottom of it really is a social interest, at least in part. And I think that's very fascinating. So I apply that same logic to the market system itself. What is the process of the free market with individual corporations and rights ownership of certain resources and the trade mechanisms? What is really being facilitated here? And it's obvious enough. It's facilitating the creation of utility-based goods, creative utility as I would call it. It's enabling a communal environment, even though it's self-interest generated through proprietary corporations hiding their information and competing against others. There still is a collaborative nature to it, once again, because of the trade mechanism that exists in whatever form, and you can do your own analysis on the integrity of that. I am not going to go into the tangent of how utterly inefficient all attributes of cost efficiency and trade are. Globalization, this is something I've talked about at length. If you are not familiar with that, you can go back to probably any of these talks and find a lot of data on that. But the market system itself is really enabling this communal creativity and this sharing of resources, in fact, as dysfunctional as it is. People often say to me, okay, in a resource-based economic model where you have a non-market system, where you have what is loosely defined but is not defined at all, but as a planned economy. Is it planned? Yes, it is planned. It's planned in localized ways that are interconnected strategically. scientifically built from the ground up based on resource management, and the most efficient scientific causality reference we can find, meaning the best designs that we can have for whatever purpose, in the most efficient way, peak efficiency, peak sustainability, all of that stuff. So the need to calculate society, the need to have, dare I say, a planned economy, I'm sorry, is critical. It's critical to human species survival at this point. The convenience of the inefficiency that we endured from the early onsets of the free market system in a much more simplistic reality, it no longer exists. It's an entirely different paradigm shift. The evolution of this system has shown its colors as parasitic and destructive, and I think this is very clear. And again, I'm not going to go on those tangents. So a planned system, a calculated society, does that mean it's like Soviet Russia where there's a bunch of people in a state and they sit there and tell everyone what they can have and what they don't know? Well, we have something very different in society today that can facilitate public interaction, that can mirror the exact type of creativity we see in the market system without the incentive of money, while also preserving the integrity of the structured necessities that we need. In other words, doing things right, doing things scientifically, not based on what money will allow us to do or not allow us to do. I want everyone to walk outside and take a look at the stores around them if you live in an urban area, if you're driving to a mini mall or something to that effect. And I want you to think to yourself when you enter these environments how it would work in a resource-based economy. The first thing you'll notice if you think this way is you'll see the great deal of overlap and duplicity and inefficiency. The competitive concept of, say, having 15 cell phone companies is exceedingly wasteful, and through the competitive mechanism of cost efficiency, it generates planned obsolescence, intrinsic obsolescence, because they can't use correct materials. The designs are always overlapping because of competition, or again planned obsolescence in the sense of like Apple, they have many stages of release, extremely wasteful company. And when you begin to recognize the unsustainable nature of store structures and corporate structures, a certain rationale will eventually take you over. You say, okay, there's no reason for all these cell phone companies. Get everyone together creatively and to create the best and continually produce the best. You need one cell phone company, one good manufacturer that deals with a very specific design, and they work to improve that design constantly based on sustainability and performance and endurance, of course. Everything that goes along with that from a sustainable standpoint. When you begin to think like this and begin to look at what society is around you, you can see how it can be grouped together, made much more simplistic. The question then becomes, how do these organizations, how do these people obtain the resources that they need? We'll continue with the cell phone company example. As we know, the cell phone has many different forms of minerals, and from gold to cobalt to a lot of different things. Depending on the way it's manufactured, there are chemical processes that are required too. So you have an extraction, you have a production, and then eventually a distribution process. We won't get to the distribution issue. That's fairly easy. How is this allocated? Well, very simply, if any organization wants to create this, they are basically a part of the community that seeks it. There is a demand for such a thing, and therefore people are brought in to create those things because of their interest or their expertise. This can be navigated very easily through a submission system, and very similar to what we have using the internet right now. This can be orchestrated very, very easily as far as resource management through our central database program, which we mentioned at length, which will tell everyone in a completely open source way, meaning all the information is available to everyone. There's no hidden proprietary anything. What is possible? And the engineers engage that system of AI, very, very simple. Again, AI is nothing complicated or spooky. Delegating your ideas, delegating your decision making, to machines is something we do every single day, from a spell check to a calculator. Those that are so Luddite and paranoid of some Skynet Terminator thing, you really need to step back and begin to think about where our interaction with these machines comes in. It can get a little spooky when we think about singularity, but I'm not going to go through all of the Ray Kurzweil stuff, and I don't necessarily buy all of the assumptions about what humans have to do. But let's just remember that technology is a tool, and we can utilize these tools, and nothing to be afraid of. The worst example of people that don't understand the movement or the Venus Project is that they think it's like a giant computer that runs everything, and that's not true. That's a ridiculous notion. It's a system of interaction with a database that can make proper associations to help our decision making. So if we're engineering a cell phone, if we're creating an institution that will provide cellular phones for the community, they engage this system to know what resources are available. The people are brought in that have an interest to do so and have an expertise to do so. And that can easily be engaged through the same type of system. People often assume that someone overarching was making all these decisions. And while that might be partially true, just like you go to a dentist, you respect authority. Just like you go to a doctor, you respect authority. Just like you might go to a microbiologist if there's something going on with pollution in an ocean somewhere. Authority is always something that has existed. Our fear of authority has kind of, well, it's legitimately manifest because of distortions of the market system. But we got to remember that technical authority is simply a position of someone's intellect over someone else's, someone who's taken more time. And as spooky as it may sound, like it's hard to jump around here, eventually that type of authority will be communicated by machines with far higher accuracy than what humans are doing. This is the evolution, and machines are a beautiful tool for this type of navigation. So coming back to my free market model, can we create the type of variety that we see around us? That's another thing. Can we have the unique abundance of everything that we see around us? And the answer is a big glaring yes. There's no reason that you have to have rigid uniformity. There's no reason that the models that have existed prior have to exist in the same way. It all comes down to what people want and the way that the engineering process is created and the production process is created. One thing that is occurring as well, and again, I'm jumping all around here, so if you're not familiar with this stuff, please bear with me. Modular robotics that have the capacity to change themselves, will enable customization of goods unlike anything ever seen. As talked about in Zeitgeist moving forward, we're dealing with a new type of three-dimensional print culture where customized printing can happen in your home, where you can print your own clothes, you can print small items for yourself, to the customization of printing to factories. So you have an automated factory in the center of a town. You get an email from somebody who has a particular design for, say, I don't know, a chair, a custom chair that's ergonomically designed to benefit, say, a back problem you might have. You send this email which has the blueprint, which is literally downloaded, three-dimensional, has all the specifics technically built into this. You send it to an automated factory directly from your computer. It's produced for you in custom due to robotics that can be extremely malleable. This is all technology that exists today. So the concept of mass production, where suddenly everything has to be uniform and the same, that isn't really the way it is if you analyze where we are today with the state of technology. The printing revolution is going to be incredible once that takes hold, As far as distribution centers and things like that, there's a certain uniformity that is fine, and who cares really when you're dealing with utility. If I need a really nice camera to go shoot a film and I go to a distribution hub and I borrow that camera and do what I need to and return it, I don't really care about customizing that. I just want it to be as advanced as possible, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be. But when it comes to customization and everything that we consider novel, again, it's this argument of novelty and originality, which is, of course, really exploited by the marketing culture because that's one of its biggest selling points. We should pull away from that anyway. I mean, there's nothing wrong with uniformity. It's what's in your brain, not what you wear or what your house looks like, that makes you unique. These are things that people forget when they analyze the market system. So let me summarize this because I know I've jumped all over the place. Excuse me. The market system creates variety, and people assume that A, they don't have the freedom to engage the market if they wanted to, and B, that the type of variety in goods wouldn't exist. Both of these are fallacies when you have an automated system that can organize both attributes, meaning it's a computerized system of interaction, and people volunteer their time to engage it. In the most intense situations I've been in advertising and all the jobs I've had, at the end of the day, there's an excitement that exists within the process of creation itself. It might be completely pointless in the sense of designing an ad for something, but people aren't just sitting there thinking about their dollar signs. When people get in the act of creativity, something takes over, and you see ego battles, see people that really want something. That's not necessarily a good thing, but it does go to show that money is not the ultimate incentive. When people are given the freedom to engage in society and to think creatively, they will pair in and work with teams that can create new technologies because they want to, because it benefits them as well. This system of accumulation of resources and design will be pinged against an artificial intelligence system that manages resources and has a database of information and knowledge. And then from there, it's spawned, and the distribution centers, production centers, extraction, all of that becomes self-evident and oscillated based on demand. Demand is very easy to assess. This is why the Mises economic calculation problem is so absurd and idiotic, is because it doesn't seem to understand that demand can be calculated through just simple participation. People can think, they can be creative about what they need. Utility and necessity will always be there. It's always been there, even long before the market system, with the invention of tools to help improving our lives and easing our lives. It didn't take money to learn how to make rocks, make rocks. It didn't take money to learn how to make tools out of rocks, to eventually morph that into metals, refine them for different purposes. This is a natural element of our creativity. So I've jumped around here a little bit again, but the market system doesn't enable creativity. It stifles it more than anything else, and that's up for a larger conversation, but it's very, very true. It's limiting in its effects holistically. If you can only imagine for a moment how robust our society would be with both material goods and its sense of responsibility and the dignity of interaction, my God. There's another one. The dignity of interaction. When I worked with Wall Street stuff and I worked in advertising and even certain musical things I did for years, there was such a loss of dignity because of the conformist notion and what you're doing just for monetary purposes for survival. What you're doing to meet the profile of a particular market. Because you're not actually engaging when you deal with marketing. You're not actually looking for utility. You're looking to exploit weaknesses of character. You're looking to exploit all this stuff that will enable a lifestyle context for people to want a particular good or anything else. I mean, how much stuff can Apple come out with? We have the iPad, the iPod, the iPhone. What else can they possibly come up with which will create a necessity for the population? This is a cultural issue that needs to be thought about, because it's not healthy. In the words of George Carlin, there's too many choices, America. It's not healthy. So anyway, you get the point. Actually, before I forget, it just popped in my mind. There's a film called Psy Wars. I do suggest people watch Psy Wars. It's free online. It's a compilation work, but it's good to understand where marketing came from if you're not familiar with the difference of the paradigm today versus before World War II. We talked about this in the activist orientation guide, how consumption had doubled since World War II because of the necessity to basically create false values to generate more money. Again, the market system thrives on cyclical turnover. We probably could have had the beginnings of a resource-based economy after World War II in abstraction because the basic necessities of people were being met. I mean, imagine that paradigm shift where people have their necessities met and they say, well, you can choose freedom, meaning lots of free time and creative interests, or you can choose to create false values to keep this market system going, to keep you employed. These are dividing lines that have continually come up, and now we're far on the other side, and a very fictitious reality, if you will, as far as what we think we need and want and how we relate to the external, all because of this system. So, okay, I think I've belabored that, and yeah, I'm going to do some questions now. But actually, before I do that, let me just quickly say regarding civil unrest, we're seeing a lot of civil unrest out there, and I want everyone to try their best, if they see this around them, to not engage in any type of actual destruction, but to really inform those that are engaging this about a new possibility and the demanding of this possibility. The future protests of the world, I think, will be about demanding a specific change, not getting angry and having temper tantrums because of the price of oil or because of unemployment or because of collapse or austerity. These are, understandable to be angry about, but this is a product of a system that we've all been participating in, so we're all to blame on some level. So everyone needs to step up and realize this type of change and the solution that's promoted and communicate that to others. Okay, so I'm going to jump into questions now. Number one, Peter, what are your thoughts on the Zeitgeist Indie Fest? There was a post on the forum regarding a concept where each chapter would engage in their own projects to create, say, their own film or something to that effect. It was, I think, if you search Zeitgeist Indie Fest on the forum, you might find this. And I think, I'm all for anything the chapters put their heads together to do. We have the unified events, town halls, Z-Days, Zeitgeist Media Festival. Really, the independence of the chapters to come up with novel ideas is exactly what they should be doing. It's not uniform, meaning like if you can't do Z-Day, you can't do it if you don't have the facilities to do a media festival. But I like the Zeitgeist Indie Fest as denoted. Again, it's just another example of many things that people can be doing. Number two, what's the status of that nonprofit organization you mentioned several shows back? That was the think tank I mentioned earlier about design, and it's still in process, so I'm still working with that. There's a lot of other things in the back burner that are going to need to happen first before we begin that type of work. That's an extremely large and complicated project, formerly known as From Earth to Venus. Number three, how's Z4 coming along? What's the overall intention behind the film? Well, I don't really want to talk about that too much, but Zeitgeist 4 in general will be about one person's evolution to coming to terms with the values that are needed to sustain life, human life, and it's done through the same type of gestural documentary / live action. So there's a gestural live action section paired in. There'll be a new female hero character that will take on a different status. It'll be kind of a different film than what you've used to seeing, but it still walks the same line as far as values. But always remember though, Z4, the Zeitgeist film series, is not exact representation of the movement. It's always a more general amalgam of values and interests and social commentary. So number four, some of the members have suggested changing the name of the movement to disassociate us from the movies. While I personally couldn't care less, have you considered this as well? End of question. Well, yes, that's been talked about for quite a while. And in the end, I consider it arbitrary, and I like the definition of the term zeitgeist, meaning the spirit of the time, the Zeitgeist Movement, a movement to the spirit of the time, a movement of culture. So I actually like it. As far as the movies itself, I've done everything I can to explain to people the difference, and anyone who takes a moment to review the website understands the obvious difference. We don't promote the things in the films per se. The films might promote some of the elements that we talk about, but it isn't the other way around. It's obvious enough. Number five, I know the Zeitgeist Media Festival is coming up, but is there still a possibility for Shara Tankian? I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. Or Immortal Technique to be contacted. I'm sorry, we're booked for the LA main event. They should be doing things in their region, I hope, if they're interested in that communication. But thank you for the notion. Number six, sorry, English is broken here. How will the morals and ethics be determined in a resource-based economy? The problem is that these subjects are subjective and they can't be applied to the scientific method. Scientific method can only be applied for objective, etc. End of question. Okay, actually that's not true. The morals and ethics, what are morals and ethics? Morals and ethics are ways you approach the world, worldviews, how you associate yourself with other people and the physical world around you, and the practices that come along with that. In my view, there's only one, well, I've been quoted as saying God is in the laws of nature and nothing more. And what I mean by that is that if you don't actually pay attention to scientific causality and base your worldview, morals, and ethics on what you learn from that causality, which is testable and everything else that goes along with the scientific premise, then your morals and ethics might have a propensity to be corrupt. Doesn't mean that it's not emergent, doesn't mean there isn't change. Obviously, you go back to ancient Greece, they still had slaves, and they probably felt, even with all their intellectual capacity, that was still morally viable, when it obviously isn't, because it isn't sustainable as a species. It's not it's not a fluffy thing where you say this is positive and this is negative. It's what works and what creates sustainability and things that are actually valued, which again is derived from the species sustainability. So Nuclear war, for example, is obviously amoral by its very concept because it has the propensity to destroy human life, and in fact all of human life if we were to detonate all the currently available nuclear warheads, etc. So to summarize that, moral and ethics has to be pulled from something real and tangible, has to have a physical referent of some kind, if you know what I mean by that. Otherwise, it's just floating ideology. And as I've said it before, with my objections to economics and politics and religion, very few philosophies within those contexts actually have relationship to the life ground, as we call it, or the earth and natural scientific processes. And that's a huge, huge problem, and why we have the problems we do today across the board. Okay, number 7. How do we deal with trolls and the angry self-appointed guardians of the status quo? You be very patient and you pick your battles very carefully. If you're talking to someone like this, you just have to feel them out. If they just go into name calling and prima facie associations and straw man, which was what I call the circus, then you have to move on and go for the low-hanging fruit. Don't torture yourself by trying to convert somebody who obviously is hell-bent on trying to insult you or trying to one-up you in a very often juvenile manner. Just don't waste your time. Let's see. Number 8. Hold on, this is a long one. I think actually they're answering the questions. So number 8. Mentioning that the open source methodology will be a dominant force in the transition to an RBE if the open source community can spill out a new Linux kernel. It's far more complex. Hold on a second. Yes, open source. The question is basically about open source. Open source is where everything should be. We have seen the revolution of open source as far as integrity with Wikipedia, at least for technical things. I, of course, don't think Wikipedia should have opinionated elements at all regarding a lot of things, but it should be about technical elements only. But that's just my view. It's far too distorted when there's nothing to balance against. You're just dealing with human opinion about certain things. But those attributes of encyclopedia references are very sound. I think it was 94% accuracy with Wikipedia. As far as Linux, another great example, we have operating systems and open source elements, even Joomla. I mean, these things are powerful, and they're people simply volunteering their time to improve it and distribute it for free. I think that's incredible, and that is something that definitely should persist in the future because it's proven itself to be very, very effective in a global community type of way, as opposed to just a rigid team of people sitting back getting paid to do what they do. It's truly an amazing feat that we're able to do that, and it really shows the interest that people have to be a part of a community and invent, even when they're not being monetarily compensated for it, because it benefits them. That's the beauty of open source. You contribute, it improves your work along with everyone else, and that goes vice versa, and that's a powerful, powerful place to be. Number 9, I believe. During the transition, it is wise to implement a temporary social stratification system that manages access to desirable shelter and equipment that remains scarce at the time. Let me read this real fast. Okay, I see what you're saying. That's an interesting idea. I'm not going to repeat that because it's too abstract, and there's a lot of things that can be stated. It's not really a question. If anyone wants to read what they wrote, you can go to the Zeitgeist Movement Radio, August 17th, 2011, host Peter Joseph, TZM thread at thezeitgeistmovement.com to see that. Number 9 again. You mentioned late last year that you would eventually write a piece on the spectrum of marginalization. Could you please remind the community the possible and possibly elaborate a little bit on what exactly you meant by this? Yeah, that's true. There's so many things going on. I apologize if I stated that and didn't get to it. It was really just an attempt to show, well, it's going to be an expression to show the different ways that the Zeitgeist movement or participants are marginalized by both the mainstream or even sort of a fringe, hatred-filled blog culture, usually very religiously driven, or then of course like the people that just refer to us as in derogatory, slanderous ways without any intellectual issue. I kind of went through that a little bit when I talked about the circus, meaning those that engage in prima facie associations and straw men only which is on one side of the spectrum, and then on the other side there's actually those that have something intellectual to talk about or a very specific point. The difference in the spectrum of marginalization is between those that have critical thought, such as, even those that have criticized us, from David Ray Griffin, not David, excuse me, no, Ed Griffin, Ed Griffin of yeah, yeah, Edward G. Griffin, excuse me, Edward G. Griffin, or Stefan Molyneux, or even in certain pockets Alex Jones. A lot of these sort of general criticisms that have come up, at least they're kind of trying to understand, and they're trying to, even though their associations, I think, are very, very limited and they bridge to the circus, they're trying to make actual arguments. That's one side of the marginalization, if you will, where it's still dismissal, but it's at least they're trying. And then on the other side, there is just the belligerent circus of insult, and those that call names, those who call you a cult member or anything like that. These are things that you just ignore because there's no way you can counter it. There's no reason to counter it. So I probably could say a lot more about that, but that's a good summary of it. Number 11, I am still having trouble with countering many emotional mind lock objections I receive from people. In the most recent town hall, you mentioned the importance of us learning to be able to do this going forward. Let's see. The biggest problem I have is having people see and understand the real disconnect between money and the life sequence of value. Many people who have watched Zeitgeist Moving Forward just do not see it, even when it is laid out so abundantly clear for them. How do we make this disconnect clearer to these people? Will you be making this the focus of any of your future lectures in order to arm the community with any in-depth strategies? Yes, I hope to. It's interesting to me as well how people will watch something like Zeitgeist Moving Forward, which has so many points, so many unrefutable elements that really are just right there for you to see, and by the end of the film they completely forget it and they don't even remember it, or they just block it out, or it's really a huge form of denial. And when people say something like, yeah, I saw Zeitgeist Moving Forward, and they dismiss it with like a few sentences, I know immediately it's not even worth trying to speak with them. If you do choose, though, you have to pinpoint them down. So if you're going to engage something like this, you have to have an example. You need to give examples to people. You need to say something to the effect of, well, okay, don't you understand how cost efficiency is creating inferior goods at the expense of wasting resources and creating and generating pollution? You can take that as a starting point, for example. That's a very good one. Then you can elaborate on planned obsolescence, intrinsic obsolescence, and then go step by step to get them to understand the rationale of this basic corrupt nature of producing inefficiency, because that's what the system demands. So that's one strategy I would say. You have to back them into a corner and just start drilling them on specific points. Make a list. I do this. Make lists of point-by-point lists. Maybe I'll post some of my lists that basically are in two categorizations. The first categorization would be the problems of the current system, and the second categorization would be the solutions of the system based on this sort of life ground reference that we talk about, of scientific causality. And then update that list as you go along with the type of objections that you continually see, ignoring the circus, of course. And then and then share that, of course, with the fellow members. This is everyone's going to be engaging in different ways in different communities, so sharing it's very, very important, but I do recommend that. And number 12, what do you say to people when they say that the Zeitgeist Movement Venus Project split has damaged the movement's image? I don't really say anything because I don't think that way. I'm not interested in the movement's image. I'm not interested in the categorization of the movement. The movement is a set of people trying to communicate values in a very, very proactive way. And I'm not concerned with my image. I'm not concerned with the movement's image. I'm not concerned with the Venus Project's image. I'm not concerned with making friends. I'm not concerned with anything but being truthful and honest about what we're doing and the necessity to engage the public in whatever way we can. So if people have a problem with the movement for whatever reason, that's their problem, not mine. Number 13, I would also like to ask where the Zeitgeist Movement members can post their suggestions on how to make the movement more efficient. Okay, well, I mean, the forum is one thing that we continually have, but I've been trying desperately to get new systems of interaction. But remember that the global site is just an amalgam element. This isn't, excuse me, this isn't there really is no global chapter or anything like that. You want to engage suggestions, please go to the About page on the Zeitgeist Movement Global, and you'll see how information flow has been designed. And it comes from chapters. It comes from chapters communicated to coordinators through rational consensus, and then the coordinators bring it up the tiers. So if you have an idea for a project, say, we'll say, for example, the Zeitgeist Indie Fest. If I was in a chapter, I would say, hey, this is a great idea. Let's have independent chapters do this. Let's bring this up in the next international chapter meeting. If it started in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, it goes to the North Carolina State chapter, and then it goes to the U.S. chapter, then it goes to the international meetings. There's no reason why that train of thought can't be maintained. The coordinators just simply make lists of suggestions and things to do. But also remember that, efficiency of the movement, because it's holographic, really comes down to your chapter. It's not about a holistic view. And this is something I've been trying to get through for a long time. Just because something global doesn't have to be initiated, it can be initiated on a chapter level. In fact, there are some chapters doing very, very different types of things at the way they organize their coordinators versus others. And as long as it doesn't create conflict, and as long as it doesn't interfere with the general form of communication, there's no problem with that. There's a great deal of flexibility. In fact, I enjoy the flexibility because it allows for more creativity and, again, more independence, and not the feeling that someone has to be under some umbrella of something else. So you need to engage your chapters and then move through those tiers. That's the way the system's been created. And of course, share ideas in general. If something comes up even just on a forum post, you never know. Sometimes this stuff can be very, very simple. The newsletter, these are also things that can be talked about. You can submit newsletter articles and press releases about specific points. Press releases, of course, are specific to things that are happening in society, but the newsletter has more flexibility as far as ideas. So let's see, number 14, I believe. Okay, I have to skip that one because I'm not familiar with the person sourced. We'll go to another number 14. While I have ideas and suggestions of my own, I was wondering if you could supply in your own words and based upon your own opinions some ideas as to what we can do to begin affecting change on local levels to bring communities together. I realize you have done some of this in the past, but information changes, and you may have some more to offer here now than you did then. Well, the local level again comes down to the chapter interests and the cultural relevance of the area. I mean, there might be certain things in some regions that don't exist in others that might be fun to engage as far as publicity. In other words, if you're in the Midwest, there might be something very, very different than if you're in New York City as far as a community event that you might do. The town halls, though, really are where it's at as far as I'm concerned, coupled with Zeitgeist Day, coupled with the Zeitgeist Media Festival. But there are other things, you have to use your own creativity. I can't be the one. In fact, going back to the prior question, as far as increasing efficiency, increasing this ability for us to communicate to the external, this is what we're all here to do. So, I've employed the main things that I think are important, and the town halls I think are the best thing that we have. Publicizing your town hall, making it interesting, making it kind of fun. You can make it creative. Do whatever you think you need to just to get people there to begin listening and opening them up to this information. And that's really the best I can say. And that will conclude the questions for now. I apologize for the other ones I didn't get to and run out of time. But I really appreciate it, and I hope everyone can stay positive out there. And don't forget, whenever you do a town hall, whenever you do anything, please make sure you get this stuff online. It's very, very important. And send it to us, too. Send it to the emails, the town hall emails. If you're making promos for the media festival, please get those up and send those to us as well. We can even create a page for the site for those promos. And of course, document. The power of this movement will be not from some recognition of an external source, but because of our proliferation of immense amounts of information, documentation of our activities. All right, everybody, take care.